All right, today we're jumping into a huge mystery that has a surprisingly simple answer. How can something that sounds so smart, copying the laws of a successful country, actually end up making another country poor? It all comes down to a fascinating idea called the transplant effect. So, let's kick things off with maybe the biggest question in economics. Why on earth are some countries rich while others stay poor? You know, it's a puzzle that's had experts scratching their heads for centuries. But the research we're looking at today points a finger at one prime suspect: a country's legal system.
Okay, first things first, we need to get a key term on the table: legality. Now, this isn't just about the laws written down in some dusty old book. Legality is all about how well those laws actually work in the real world. Are they enforced? Do people trust the system enough to actually use them? It's the difference between law on paper and law in practice, and that difference is everything.
And get this, the link between this idea of legality and a country's wealth, it's not just strong, it's incredibly strong. Looking at data from 49 different countries, it's crystal clear that nations with high legality are just vastly richer. In fact, just a 1% bump in legality is tied to a nearly 5% jump in income per person. This tells us that having bad laws isn't just a symptom of being poor, it's a major cause.
So you hear that and you think easy fix, right? If bad laws are the problem, then the solution seems pretty straightforward. For decades, a lot of international aid programs have basically run on this idea. Just take the legal codes from a successful country like Germany or the UK, airlift them over to a poor country, and boom, problem solved. Or maybe not.
Well, here's where the story takes a turn. Because when this exact strategy was tried out in Russia after the Soviet Union fell, it was a total disaster. Even the brilliant legal experts who helped write Russia's new laws had to throw up their hands and admit it. Just dropping in good laws from somewhere else flat out did not work. So that just deepens the mystery, right? If giving poor countries good laws doesn't work, what are we all missing? And that big failure forces us to look at the whole problem in a new way. It brings us right to the core argument of this research. See, the old way of thinking was all about the type of law that mattered, like is it based on the English system or the French system? But this paper proposes a radical new idea. What if the process, how a country gets its laws, is way more important than which specific laws it gets? And that brings us to the big idea, the transplant effect. Seriously, think of it just like a medical transplant. You can have the best, healthiest organ in the world, but if you put it in a body that's not a match, that isn't prepared for it, the body's just going to reject it. It's the same thing with laws. When a country just copy-pastes foreign laws without really adapting them to fit its own culture and history, the legal system just fails to take root. So to really dig into this, the researchers basically sorted countries into a few buckets. You've got the origins, countries like France and the UK that develop their legal systems from the ground up. Pretty much everyone else is a transplant. But the crucial difference is whether they were receptive, meaning they thoughtfully adapted the laws to fit, or unreceptive, meaning they just copied them wholesale. And this little chart here lays it all out. Look, the absolute best case: you're a direct receptive transplant. You carefully adapt laws from an origin country, and your legal system works just fine. But in every other scenario, you run into trouble. Whether you're unreceptive or you're indirect, meaning you copied from a country that had also copied, you get hit with that negative transplant effect. And the worst possible outcome? Yeah, that's when you blindly copy from another country that also blindly copied. Okay, so that's the theory. It sounds good, it makes a lot of sense, but what do the numbers say? Does the data actually back it up? Let's check out the smoking gun. And wow, the numbers do not mess around. When you account for all the other factors, countries that are dealing with this transplant effect have legality scores that are, on average, a full 33% lower. That's a massive 1/3 disadvantage baked right into the country's foundation. And here's the real kicker. This one single idea, the transplant effect, can explain almost 69% of the difference in legal effectiveness across the entire world. It's a way, way more powerful explanation than that old theory about which legal family a country belongs to. It really is all about the how, not the what.
But, these are just numbers on a chart. What does this actually mean for real people, for their daily lives? To see the staggering real-world impact of this, let's take a look at the case of Ecuador.
So Ecuador is like the textbook example of an unreceptive transplant. It got French law, but it came through Spain and then Venezuela with very little adaptation along the way.
Back in 1994, its income per person was about $1,200. But then the researchers asked, what if? What if Ecuador had somehow avoided the transplant effect? Well, hold on to your hats. Its income wouldn't have been $1,200. It would have been closer to $13,000. We're talking more than 10 times higher. They would have been on par with Ireland at the time. That just shows you the incredible multi-generational cost of getting this legal process wrong. Okay, so that's the problem, and it is a big one. But the good news is, we're not just stuck. The research actually gives us a roadmap for how to do this right. First, you have to build up demand at home so that citizens and businesses actually want and will use the new rules. Second, you have to adapt, not just copy-paste. And third, you have to invest in education and training so these new ideas become familiar, not foreign.
So, at the end of the day, the verdict is in. The journey is way more important than the destination. How a country gets its laws is a much, much better predictor of its economic success than which laws it happens to pick.
But wait, there's one last twist to this story, and it's a hopeful one. This transplant effect, as powerful as it is not a life sentence. A country's history doesn't have to be its destiny. The paper points to several countries, think Singapore, Taiwan, even Spain, that were once stuck but have managed to dramatically improve their legal systems over time through serious, dedicated reform.
And that just leaves us hanging with this really fascinating question, doesn't it? We now know what causes the problem. We've seen just how devastating it can be. But if the transplant effect isn't permanent, how exactly did those countries pull it off? What are the precise steps they took to escape their past and build legal systems that actually work? Now that is a puzzle for another day.